Edward Robert Mussery wasn't always internet famous. Long before YouTube, he was a TV personality. In the 1970s and early 80s, he hosted a children's show in Kansas City called 41 Treehouse Lane under the stage name Uncle Ed. He was also the campy vampire host of a late-night horror show, Uncle Ed's All Night Life. Kids seemed to love him and parents trusted him. He wore a cape, made corny jokes, and weighed the camera like your favorite weird uncle. But then in 1986, everything changed. Muskery was arrested for having inappropriate contact with a 14-year-old boy. He pleaded no contest to battery in 1987. He even served 18 months in prison followed by 10 years probation. His career as he knew it was over. And so he disappeared from the spotlight. Until that is the internet unwittingly gave him a second chance. In 2006, well into his 70s, Ed resurfaced with a new name and a new platform. And that channel would be called Ederm, a YouTube channel built around strange, often delightful videos of himself dancing, lip-syncing, and being unapologetically odd. He sometimes wore sunglasses. He crooned along to songs. He acted out strange characters. He uploaded more than 130 videos. And somehow it clicked. People seemed to love it. He wasn't trying to be cool. He wasn't trying to follow trends. It just seemed like he was being his weird self. And that was enough to turn him into a cult figure in the early days of YouTube. By 2009, he had over 7 million views, which at that time was huge. He never hid his age, but he also never mentioned his past. To most viewers, EDM was just a sweet old man having fun online. But in reality, his videos weren't just eccentric. They were actually completely illegal. What most of Uncle Ed's fans didn't know or didn't want to believe was that his ability to post videos at all was violating the law. When Edward Mussery was convicted in 1987, his probation terms were strict. After serving his time, he was placed on a register and he was legally forbidden from owning a computer or using the internet without explicit permission. But by the time his YouTube channel blew up, Ed had already crossed that line. In 2007, after suffering harassment from neighbors in Florida after that as they found out about his past, Ed then moved to South Carolina. Legally, he was required to notify local authorities. However, he didn't. He feared that if people knew who he really was, he'd be driven out once again. So instead, he chose to keep quiet. And then came the interview. Mussery appeared on a local TV segment arguing that reformed offenders of his type should be allowed to live in peace. He also admitted on air that he hadn't registered his move with the authorities. Obviously, South Carolina police became aware of the clip and within days they were at his door. They seized his computer and some alcohol, both of which were forbidden under local law for someone on the register. They found no illegal content, but it didn't matter. He'd violated his probation just by using the machine. A judge placed him on 5 more years of probation. This time, the conditions were crystal clear. To Ed, he was to have no computer. He was to have no internet. There was to be no uploading of content. So Ed came up with a workaround. He continued making videos, but he had his partner Marion upload them from her device. They believed that this loophole kept him within the law, but prosecutors wouldn't see it that way. In 2010, Mussery was arrested once again. At the sentencing hearing, he stood in front of Judge Mark Hill and said, "I'm frankly bewildered that I'm here. I don't think I've done anything wrong. I'm an entertainer. I've entertained all my life. These videos are done in fun, and I'm sure that most of the people see it that way." The court, however, didn't agree, even though he wasn't accused of hurting anyone or of reoffending in any other way. The judge, of course, found him in violation of his probation. Mussery was now sentenced to 5 years in prison. And just like that, EDM vanished from the internet. The backlash came quickly. Supporters flooded the comments on his channel. They called the sentence unjust, cruel, and unnecessary. They pointed out that the channel had brought joy to thousands and that he'd harmed no one with his videos. Even one of his neighbors told reporters he's a helpful, warm, loving, kind, friendly man who's always there when you need him. But the legal system just doesn't work in feelings. So Ed was back in custody. Proof that some crimes cannot just be forgotten or erased. The fact is, in his past, he did what he did. His partner and fiancée Marion continued to update his YouTube page whilst he was locked up. She kept fans informed. She tried to keep his presence alive. And then in 2011, Marion posted a somber update. Ed had been diagnosed with lung cancer. The doctor gave him 3 months to live. He was transferred to a medical facility at Lake Butler, but he was still incarcerated and still unable to return home. And then on January the 8th, 2012, Edward's time on his earth came to a close. He was 79 years old. That night, Marion uploaded one final video to the YouTube channel. She spoke, voice trembling, and told their followers, "Ed's gone. He died last night. I want people to remember him for the joy he gave, not for the mistake he made." Today, if you visit EDM's YouTube channel, you'll still find him there. The robe, the sunglasses, the unmistakable grin of a man who believed he was born to be on camera. Of course, no new videos have been posted in years, but the comments haven't stopped. Under videos like Pretty Woman or All I Want for Christmas is My 2 Front Teeth, new viewers still stumble in, curious and confused. Some are there to laugh, some to remember, and some to argue about whether a man like Ed should ever be forgotten. He believed that regardless of what he'd done, the videos he created made people happy. And by the numbers, millions of views, thousands of comments, entire fan pages, he wasn't wrong. Edward believed he should be forgiven and people should move on. But how do you feel about this one? Samantha Walford wanted to be known, not just locally and certainly not quietly. What she wanted was fame. The kind that now comes with ring lights and loyal subscribers. And in her corner of the internet, she'd already started carving that out. Her channel, Simply Manic, wasn't huge, but it did have traction. She vlogged about her life, her kids, and her dreams. She vented about exhaustion, about ambition, and about how hard it was to raise 5 children before the age of 25. Hey guys! So, I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos and a lot of different things, and I see a lot of women, I guess not women, teenagers. Lot of teenagers are wanting a baby and actually talk about it on their YouTube channels and stuff. And I just wanted to post this video for all those women who think that having a child as a teen would be something smart to do. For starters, you do not have a life anymore after you have a baby. You become mom. You lose your identity. You're not a person anymore. It's really hard to retain being a person and being mom. Any sleep that you used to get is gone because up until they turn about 8:42. 4. They're going to wake up all hours of the night and come wake you up. They had a nightmare. They need a drink. They wet the bed. There's a million reasons. Samantha had her first pair of twins when she was just 19, and then another set after getting together with a local tattoo artist Ernest or Ernie Ibra in 2008. A 5th child followed a couple of years later. By the time she was 24, the 2 of them were married and juggling a household of 7. Ernie worked 2 jobs, manufacturing by day. Inappropriate contact with a 14-year-old boy. He pleaded no contest to battery in 1987. He even served 18 months in prison followed by 10 years probation. His career as he knew it was over. And so he disappeared from the spotlight. Until that is the internet unwittingly gave him a second chance. In 2006, well into his 70s, Ed resurfaced with a new name and a new platform. And that channel would be called Ederm, a YouTube channel built around strange, often a delightful videos of himself dancing, lip-syncing, and being unapologetically odd. He sometimes wore sunglasses. He crooned along to songs. He acted out strange characters. He uploaded more than 130 videos. And somehow it clicked. People seemed to love it. He wasn't trying to be cool. He wasn't trying to follow trends. It just seemed like he was being his weird self. And that was enough to turn him into a cult figure in the early days of YouTube. By 2009, he had over 7 million views, which at that time was huge. He never hid his age, but he also never mentioned his past. To most viewers, EDM was just a sweet old man having fun online. But in reality, his videos weren't just eccentric. They were actually completely illegal. What most of Uncle Ed's fans didn't know or didn't want to believe was that his ability to post videos at all was violating the law. When Edward Messerieri was convicted in 1987, his probation terms were strict. After serving his time, he was placed on a register and he was legally forbidden from owning a computer or using the internet without explicit permission. But by the time his YouTube channel blew up, Ed had already crossed that line. In 2007, after suffering harassment from neighbors in Florida after that as they found out about his past, Ed then moved to South Carolina. Legally, he was required to notify local authorities. However, he didn't. He feared that if people knew who he really was, he'd be driven out once again. So instead, he chose to keep quiet. And then came the interview. Messeri appeared on a local TV segment arguing that reformed offenders of his type. And Little Caesars by night. He was quiet, technical, a former bookworm, someone who loved computers and gaming. The couple weren't perfect, though. They clashed often, especially once Samantha started prioritizing her YouTube channel. She believed the channel could grow into something bigger for her. Acting, sponsorships, recognition, and she told friends that it was her way out. But to Ernie, it was just a distraction, a hobby taking her away from the kids. And from reality. But their fights weren't just about the videos. Samantha alleged maltreatment. In 2014, she filed a complaint that led to Ernie's arrest and a protective order. However, his family insist that this wasn't true. They said Samantha wanted out and was just looking for a reason to make it happen. And for a while, things quietened down. The video slowed and the family seemed to stabilize until that is February the 20th, 2015. That's the morning that Samantha called her mother crying. She said that masked men had broken into the house. They tied her up. They'd taken Ernie. But when police arrived, they didn't find a chaotic crime scene. Instead, they found a suspicious one. Police arrived in the early morning hours of February the 20th. The front door had already been kicked in. Samantha was upstairs tied at the wrists and ankles gagged. However, inside the home, there was no real damage. No valuables were taken. There was no broken glass, overturned furniture, or frantic signs of escape. There was, however, red DNA on the wall and a lock of hair by the door. But everything else just fell wrong. Samantha told officers a terrifying story. She said that at around 1 a.m. masked intruders burst into the bedroom. She said they pulled the covers off the couple as they slept. One of the men held a sharp implement to her neck and they dragged Ernie downstairs, beating him savagely. She said they forced him to look at her as they did it. "They were using me like bait," she said through tears. She claimed they pistol-whipped Ernie in the face, then forced her upstairs and tied her up before disappearing into the night. After they left with Ernie, she said she scooted over to her phone and then used her face to dial her mother, not 911. She said that her mother was simply the first number in her call log. Detectives, though, weren't buying it. One of them asked, "Well, how did you dye your mother with your face?" She replied that that number just came up first, but that wound detail started to unravel everything. Her injuries were inconsistent. Her bindings weren't tight, and the intruders supposedly violent and under the influence had, for some reason, left her completely unharmed. By sunrise, Ernie's body had been found in the woods near Sand Crossing in Camp County. Someone had pulled the trigger once whilst aimed at the back of his head. This was no longer a home invasion and a kidnapping. Now it was murder. And to make things worse for Samantha, her version of events was falling apart. At first, Samantha claimed to have no idea who the intruders were. She insisted they were strangers, just faceless men in black, high on something out of control. And then suddenly she remembered her name, Johnny Reb. She said that she'd met him at the hospital earlier that day. She said that he got angry when she told him about her husband's alleged maltreatment and that she'd let him borrow her car. That Johnny was actually Jonathan Sanford, a recently released felon. Police tracked him down at Titus County Regional Hospital, where he just welcomed a child into the world with his girlfriend. With him was Jose Antonio Pon, his brother-in-law. Both men were arrested for aggravated kidnapping and, strangely, neither of them denied being involved, but both of them had a different story about who was behind it. According to them, Samantha had planned everything. The initial idea, though, wasn't murder. She wanted to frame Ernie to plant Crystal in his truck and then call the cops. But that plan fell apart. So they went for something far simpler to end his time on this earth. That night, Samantha Sanford Pons and another man named Octavius Rhymes drove to buy the crystal. They used it in her car. She sat in the front with her kids in the back. This would be the same car that would later be used to abduct Ernie. The three men also indulged in crystal before the attack. As we know, they kicked in the door, pistol-whipped Ernie, and then dragged him from his home and drove him out past the steel mill. It was there in the cold woods that Jose Pons pulled the trigger. Detectives would later find text messages that Samantha sent to Rhymes while police were searching for Ernie. One of them read, "Destroy his phone." Thank you for sticking around until the end of this video. I am Mr. Nobody, and I'd love to know what you thought about this case. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What intrigued you the most, and what case would you like to see us explore next here on the channel? Your input is vital to this community, so don't hesitate to share your ideas. Remember to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already, so you never miss another deep dive into the shadows. Stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next mystery.
It's May 8th, 2009, and today I nearly died. I wake up this morning and it is storming like crazy. I can hear the hail on the roof. I look out my window. The pool is going crazy because there's so much water flowing into it. The trees are crazy. It's still pitch dark outside and it's like 7:20. So I get ready really fast and I rush to school, out the door, and then I'm leaving for school and there is just tons of rain. And it's like the street is just like one entire puddle. And I'm going and there's trees down in the road. So I'm freaking out. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be late. But then I turn on the main road of my town, and the wind is so crazy. You just see water. It's like horizontal rain, and all the cars are like veering. I was having trouble keeping my car on the road. I drive a Hummer. This should not be happening. Anyway, so you can look down the road and you just see each individual business's lights go out. It was actually really cool. And then they come back on, and I turn on the road that my school is on. There's a power plant right by it, and it explodes. Like sparks go all across the road and like hit the road. Oh my gosh, it was crazy. Right in front of my car. I was freaking out.